You are listening to Venture Beyond, Stories from Hidden Worlds. If you enjoy this episode, please leave a like down below and share with a friend. And, if you haven't already, subscribe to the show so you don't miss an episode or new series and updates. Pokemon Legends ZA is here, a game I'm incredibly excited to play. Kalos was always one of my favorite regions, and I know I'm going to have a blast diving back in. While I get through the game and work on a review, I thought I might do something a little different. A look through Pokemon's past by ranking each mainline game. Today we'll start with the games on Game Boy, Game Boy Color, and Game Boy Advance. Let's talk the Golden Age of Pokemon, Gens 1 through 3. I vividly remember the first day I encountered Pokemon. I got on the bus to elementary school in Tennessee, and one of my friends who was in a higher grade showed me Pokemon Blue on his Game Boy. It was like I was struck by lightning, or Pikachu's thunder, I suppose. I loved the designs, the game mechanics, and so much about what I saw. I saw him take on Erica with his team, and we both cheered when he finally beat her on his third try. Every day on the bus, I'd watch him push through the game, beating the Elite Four, encountering the Missing No glitch, and falling for that dumb Mew under the truck and Armor Mewtwo rumor. It was wild. Then, for Christmas that year, I got my own Game Boy with Pokemon Yellow. The rest, as they say, is history. Every time a new game is announced, I'm glued to Cerebi.net, waiting for news about new Pokemon and so on. Heck, the day that I'm recording this, we just got more Mega Evolution news for ZA, and I am stoked. Some of these games would turn out to be great. Others, well, left much to be desired. There's no such thing as a perfect Pokemon game, but there are some that get close. So let's break down our ranking system here. S is reserved for games that truly stand out. They need to not only progress the Pokemon formula, but also have great new Pokemon, a great story, and a satisfying structure. If you, forgot to put more than 2 options of a specific, very integral type in your decks before the Elite Four, like a certain set of games, you shouldn't expect to get an S. A is for good, solid entries that maybe have a couple issues. B is for games that may have 1 or 2 big problems, or games that are just okay. C is for games that have many problems that actively work against the game. Trubbish level is for games that maybe should have gone back to the drawing board. Note that I'm putting third games like Crystal and Platinum separate from the original 2, since the third entries usually have something different that sets them apart. I will be harder in grading these since they have the benefit of seeing what works or doesn't work in the original pair, and should represent either a substantial new experience or the definitive way to experience that region in its generation. Also, just to spice up this tier list, I'll be including my favorite non-legendary Pokemon from each. So, let's go in chronological order here, starting with Pokemon Red, Blue, and Green. The ones that started it all and kicked off Pokemania. They are absolute classics. It's kind of amazing the story they were able to tell with a few sprinkles of text boxes here and there. As a kid, I really felt the struggle against Team Rocket was a fight against time. These original games have some, questionable sprites for Pokemon, like the always bizarre Execute. Yeah, what the heck? Or this painful looking Machoke. You okay there, buddy? But that kind of is part of the charm of the games. Game Freak was still figuring out what they wanted these characters to look like. They went through so many iterations of the characters, so many different art styles before landing on this that it's kind of amazing that the art direction is even semi-consistent. Of course, it goes without saying that these games are a buggy mess. with glitches like the badge boost glitch or focus energy cutting your crit chance down to a quarter instead of quadrupling it like it's supposed to. Just fundamentally altering the games in unintended ways. And then there's just the silly stuff like Lorelei, one of the Elite Four for God's sake, for some reason still using super potions? Really? That's all you can spare for your beloved tanky water and ice types? Lapras deserves so much better. Anyway, I can't in my right mind give these games any lower than A tier. Yes, there's lots of problems, but the games are good in spite of those. Without those problems, I think S tier would be more than justified, but assigning too much weight to those issues I think is unfair. Let me know what you think in the comments. My favorite Pokemon from these is Ninetales, one of my favorite Pokemon of all time, and a real powerhouse in these games with its speed and special. Pokemon Yellow. This is the first Pokemon game I played through to completion. I loved Yellow, and still do. I think its nods to the anime and refinements to the art style really helped it stick. They were definitely cooking with this. That being said, the restriction in starter choice hurts replayability some, and never being able to evolve Pikachu, while thematically appropriate, really sucks from a gameplay standpoint. I adore Raichu. In fact, the first holo card I ever got was a Raichu, so it was a bit of a kick in the pants to not be able to evolve Pikachu. It just felt a little unfair, and against the spirit of Pokemon. The little guys evolved to become stronger. Instead, we were stuck with Pikachu. Not a buffed one or a special Pikachu like Ash had in the show, but a normal Pikachu. I did like, however, that they made it so you could get the other starters rather early. I think more games should do that, honestly. We also got our first taste of the friendship system we'd see in future generations. Many of the same glitches and problems still remain from the original games, and again, while thematically appropriate, reducing Lieutenant Surge to just one Raichu is a bit of a crime. Especially because we'd never be able to get our own without trading. However, with the art style coming together and other unique features, I think it's a big enough positive to outweigh these drawbacks, helping Yellow stay in the A tier with its brothers and sisters. My favorite from this game is actually Nidoking, since mine absolutely demolished Pokemon Yellow in the first playthrough I had. A high-level Nidoking with Thrash is quite the force to deal with. Pokemon Gold and Silver. Gold and Silver took everything I loved about Pokemon in Gen 1 and refined it into a beautiful, more impactful experience. I love the new Pokemon. I personally think Pichu is a superior design to Pikachu. I will die on that hill. And Scissors somehow manages to make Scyther even cooler. Though some I didn't like nearly as much as others. Looking at you, Apom. The new graphics, though, made Pokemon look better than ever, showing off both the new and old favorites in a better light than ever before. Of course, probably the biggest change was the splitting of Special, among other pretty vital adjustments like not tying crit chance to speed. Oh geez, thank you for that. The new system also finally addressed tons of bugs and glitches from Gen 1. No more badge boost glitch. Of course, Gen 2 had its own collection of bugs and glitches. Don't even get me started on Kurt's apricorn balls. Gold and Silver also started the box art legendary tradition, focusing the narrative of each game around the conflict or pursuit of a given legendary Pokemon. This helped to focus player attention on a goal to catch said Pokemon, adding a driving motivation outside of just a desire to progress the story and grow stronger. Then, once you beat the Elite Four, you get probably one of the best surprises in any Pokemon game. Return to Kanto. Sure, Kanto turns out to be a somewhat abbreviated and woefully underleveled board, but being able to revisit somewhere you know so well and see how it and the people living there have changed was so fulfilling. The two also introduce new ways to encounter Pokemon that make the game feel more alive, like roaming legendaries, Rock Smash Rocks, Headbutt Trees, Swarms, and the new breeding mechanic that changed things even more. I might hate roaming legendaries, but it is an interesting concept that adds more depth to the world. Gold and Silver were not perfect, however. To me, they'll always be an S. But the truth is that, there's a few issues that knock it down a peg. The level curve and balance in the game is all over the place, making for one of the most inconsistent and uneven experiences of any Pokemon game. Game Freak was obviously a bit too ambitious for what they could achieve at the time. They wanted to open the door a bit midway through the game to give the player more freedom, but that came at the cost of a plateau and difficulty that never really recovers. Then Kanto is just an unjustified cakewalk. It is kind of sad that only Blue can pose a serious challenge. However, that final fight with Red helps redeem that letdown a bit. Also, while they added 2 new super exciting types to help rebalance the game and add more options, many of the new Pokemon of these types were rather sparse and underwhelming. Not all, mind you, but while Sneasel and Murkrow have fantastic designs, their stats are frankly pretty bad. It just feels like a missed opportunity. And strange that no Kanto Pokemon got the Dark type, especially ones where it would have made a lot of sense. I could totally see a Dark Poison Arbok. Even a Bug Dark Pinsir would have been cool. I don't know, it just feels like a strange miss. While I love these games, the story is a bit weaker than Gen 1. They found more ways to dynamically pull the player into conflict with Team Rocket, but their plan is just... well, it's not a plan. Also, the box art legendaries have a tenuous, if any, involvement in the story. It's an unfortunate miss that Game Freak would certainly learn from. One way they succeeded, though, was bringing leaders into the story more. It was incredibly satisfying fighting Team Rocket with Lance, helping Jasmine return Ampharos back to health, or beating Claire's expectations and passing the Dragon Den's test. It made me feel more involved with the world, rather than just being a blank, lifeless slate waiting for stimulus. All in all, I think it would be outrageous to give Gold and Silver a lower grade than the Gen 1 games. It did so much to progress and evolve the Pokemon formula, but with just as many drawbacks as the older games as well, I can't justify giving it an S either. So I think I'd give them an A, though again, it'll always be an S with me. My pick for these is Typhlosion, one of my favorite fire starters ever, which is crazy because I like most fire starters. Honestly, it's just a match made in heaven. It is so much fun to use in this game. Pokemon Crystal. While Crystal didn't really fix many of the issues with Gold and Silver, it did open options to players a bit. Things like the free egg you can get with a baby Pokemon gave players a chance to get a Pokemon they wouldn't have been able to get that early. Though, for some reason, I still seem to get Smoochum like 80% of the time. I don't know if I have a curse that I'm just gonna get Smoochum every time. The addition of the Battle Tower also gave players a new way to play the game. I didn't play it all that much, but it was a pretty interesting idea that would evolve through successive generations. The choice of characters, whether you play as male or female, was a great move, making the game experience even more personal. I think the thing Crystal did best was tying the box art legendary into the journey more. While you could honestly miss Suicune if you were not looking for it, You didn't have to, say, rummage through an enormous dungeon to find it. To some, that was a letdown, but I felt like the encounter was more naturalistic, or like a meeting of fate kind of thing. Altogether, I think that Crystal was an improvement from Gold and Silver, but many of the issues from those two remain unaddressed in Crystal, making for a still uneven experience. I think it deserves an A+, but if it had fixed many of the issues with Gold and Silver, it would easily have been one of the best Pokemon games ever made. My pick for Crystal has got to be the extreme speed Dragonite you can get in the Dragon's Den. I really got attached to the guy. Any excuse to get a strong dragon Pokemon is a great time to me. I just really like the dragon type. Though, like many others, I really wish Dragonite resembled Dragonair more, or even just had Dragonair's color scheme. Seriously, why do you have to have that green shiny? You could have just used Dragonair's colors for the shiny, and I think everyone would have been super happy. Just saying. You can still change it. It's okay. Pokemon Ruby and Sapphire. Representing a massive leap forward in technology and storytelling power, Gen 3 pretty much had it all. Amazing Pokemon, a fantastic, well-told story that skillfully ties everything together, and an evolution in mechanics that made Pokemon better than it ever had been before. The inclusion of abilities made even more of an impact on the game than splitting Special, opening new and interesting strategies, and making some Pokemon viable that never were or would have been otherwise. Just imagine Shedinja without Wonder Guard. Bad time. Game Freak took full advantage of the generational shift from the Game Boy Color to the Game Boy Advance to bring the Pokemon world to life in vibrant color. And with those nostalgic farty trumpets that never fail to give me a chill when I first load up a Gen 3 game. Pokemon never looked better. The addition of running shoes and the two different kinds of bikes made for more ways to get around. The addition of double battles even further expanded what Pokemon could be, opening the door for even more strategy and skill, and, eventually kind of becoming the standard format for competitive. The new cast of Pokemon brought one of the best dexes in Pokemon history, I'd argue, with a set of starters that is probably the best trio ever. There is tons of type diversity, opening loads of options to players, and there were so many good Pokemon that players were honestly spoiled for choice. Sure, not all the new Mons were winners. Just ask Tropius about how much life sucks with a fantastic character design that's betrayed by horrible stats and learn set. Seriously, they did him so dirty. The new Dive HM was interesting as well, unlocking another dimension to water areas. I always hoped that something similar would happen for the move Fly. Keep that in mind for later. But unfortunately, this is when the number of TMs started to get uncomfortable. Keep that in mind for later also. Learn sets for Pokemon were better, but not what I'd call good yet, unless you were Swampert and you just, win the game. Remember that for later also. There's also a massive backtracking part of the game that always felt like a strange hiccup, but not horrible. Keep that in mind for later also. There are two real problems with the games, something that we'll see addressed just around the corner. For one, types were still tied to either attack or special attack, instead of the move. This kept some Pokemon from being as strong as they could have been, or forced into being mixed in stats due to their typing. Just imagine if Blaziken could focus solely on attack, and amp its speed and defenses instead of having to waste points on special attack. This isn't necessarily Ruby and Sapphire's fault. I mean, Diamond and Pearl weren't out yet, so the idea of changing how attack and special attack and types work hadn't really been tried yet. but in retrospect, it's something that constantly is a chafing point with me. The other issue is one that is born from the thematic elements at play between land and sea, which is to say, as an IGN reviewer once said, there's too much water. Now, I don't think it's nearly that bad, but you'll be sick of surfing around getting Zubat level encounters with Wingull and Pelipper near the end of the game. I understand why it is like this, but I can't help but wonder if scattering a few larger islands in might have kept the sea from feeling quite so oppressive. I also feel like there's a bit of a missed opportunity here to make players feel the version difference in a more tactile way. What if there were portions of the map that were dry land in one version and covered in water or flooding in the other? Just think if Sapphire had more dry land or falling ocean levels, and Team Aqua's crazy plan of flooding the world to make more ocean at least seemed like a solution to a problem, just, horribly misguided and short-sighted. And then Ruby had the opposite problem, with Team Magma rushing for the opposite solution. It's kind of unrealistic and really just me wishing for something I already love to hit even harder. But I don't know, I think it could have worked. As it stands, Ruby and Sapphire are easily one of the greatest Pokemon games of all time, and easily earns our first S rank. They really set the standard for storytelling balance, polish, and new offerings for all titles going forward. My pick for Ruby and Sapphire is my favorite Pokemon of all time, Gardevoir. It honestly feels criminal to have a run of the game without one. It was the first time I had a run with a psychic Pokemon that I really clicked with, since I never really had someone to trade with to get an Alakazam. Seriously, so much love for Gardevoir. The story, its stats, moveset, everything, it's just the best. Pokemon Fire Red and Leaf Green. In a triumphant return to Kanto, Game Freak took everything they had learned in Gen 2 and 3 and brought the original Pokemon games to life in a profound way, both respectful of the original games while bringing all the improvements that Ruby and Sapphire had made. Fire Red and Leaf Green became the standard for how remakes should be done. Even though these were essentially just revamps of the original games, you could tell that Game Freak was not content with a one-to-one facsimile. They wanted these games to have their own touch, and they did so brilliantly. The pair are replete with personality, and I'd argue is still one of the best, most cohesive visions of Kanto we've ever gotten. When I want to play Kanto, this is my go-to. The inclusion of the Sevi Islands was a neat step also, giving players a little more to explore in Kanto. The addition of abilities and the new types adds so much more to Kanto, really opening the door of viability. Geodudes and Gravelers went from pushover nuisances to potential nightmares with Sturdy and their tendency to explode. Levitate made Pokemon like Weezing and Gengar even more viable, and No-Guard Machamp could be terrifying. Steel Electric Magneton was unique and cool. It really changed the whole dex in a meaningful way. Not every Pokemon necessarily got an upgrade per se. I personally hate the standard starter ability, Torrent, Blaze, those ones. It just kind of feels like a waste to me and, should be something that's a little bit more interesting, but that's just me. But more often than not, the changes and adjustments that the Pokemon got were just what they needed. Not to mention, most got better learn sets, if not perfect yet. There were a couple issues though. There are no Dark-type Pokemon in the Kanto dex. That really starts to wear on the game. Sure, there are Dark-type moves, but the absence of Pokemon of that type both buffs Pokemon weak to it and hurts those strong against it. As if Bug and Fighting types needed more of a kick to the pants in Kanto. It's especially strange coming off of Ruby and Sapphire, which has such a great diversity of types, though the scale is a bit heavy on water types, let's be honest. In the end, as great as the two are, and as much as they defined what remakes should be, they didn't address some of the sore spots of the originals, and still retained some weaknesses of Ruby and Sapphire. I'd call them an A, with a note that with a couple of dark types and some better movesets, especially with the attack special split just over the horizon, this would be an S rank. My pick for Fire Red and Leaf Green is Lapras, who I just really enjoyed using in my first Fire Red playthrough. I really liked tanky Pokemon back then, and Lapras scratched that itch. Plus, it's Lapras. Pokemon Emerald. I have a strange perspective on Emerald. I couldn't afford to get it when it came out, so I sat this one out until I found it on sale before Diamond and Pearl came out. That being said, I might have a bit harder opinion on Emerald than most. While there are things that it added, it didn't quite feel different or substantial enough an upgrade from Ruby and Sapphire to justify its existence. In fact, it kind of just seemed to copy some of Crystal's homework, shrug, and move on. Making Wallace a new champion was interesting, but it kind of made a new problem for Emerald. You really are going to come from Juan, the final gym leader, a water specialist who's just fancier Wallace, after fighting a water evil team, and then do the Elite Four with a water specialist champion? I get that Hoenn is the water boss, but seriously, too much water. And don't get me wrong, I love Rayquaza. I love having the extra red style final battle with an amped up Steven Stone, but I always felt like something was missing. Combining the Ruby and Sapphire stories was great, but it was just a bit haphazard. The third entry in many ways is supposed to be the definitive way to experience that region in its generation. I don't think that Emerald quite does that. It doesn't actually solve any problems or expand or redefine the game in a meaningful way like Crystal and Yellow did. A lot of people might point to the Battle Frontier and some of the new areas and so on, but I don't think it is enough to give it the same rank as what we've seen before. I feel like it's a slightly worse experience than the originals, and that is not good. So again, I might be a bit harsh, but I think Emerald earns a B+. It's good, but the misses hurt quite a bit. My pick for Emerald is Aggron. I love steel types, and Aggron is so much fun to use in Hoenn. Of course, that that double fighting weakness really hurts. Yikes. So here's our rankings as of now. What do you think? Do you agree with some of my assessments? Do you think I've missed something that would influence the grade on these? Does Ruby and Sapphire deserve an S rank? Should one of these be downgraded or is seriously undervalued? What are your experiences playing these games? I feel that the more that we talk about Pokemon games of the past, the better perspective we have on Pokemon games in the current year. Yeah, this is just a look at games from the Game Boy consoles, but I think it gives us a better perspective on things that worked and helps us understand things that maybe didn't work as well in the games to come. I'll have a new Let's Talk on the games in the DS and 3DS era coming up next month, so we can talk about those games. I'm hoping by that time I'll be close to the end of Pokemon Legends ZA and we'll be working on a review, but we'll rank all of these games first. Thank you so much for watching. Like I said, let me know what you think in the comments, and until next time, let's talk.